It's always a pleasure to come here and speak. It's funny that I actually gave a talk on Women's Day here 15 years ago. Yeah, so I was just wondering about how things have been since then. I don't know what actually qualifies me to talk about Annamani. Perhaps one thing is that when I was a young PhD student, I was a TFR student, and we had a building on the IISc campus, and we used to hang around a lot in the Raman Institute, especially in the library and so on. And it was sort of one big community, and so I encountered her a lot at that time, and it was something really fantastic. This is how I sort of remember her. She was the, quintessential scientist. I mean, she just had science written all over her. That's the only way I can describe her. Of course, she was also the quintessential Gandhian, and she had this no-nonsense persona, and she would just walk into a room. She would always have something non-trivial to say. But for me, in particular, I think it was very refreshing to have her around, because there were not a whole lot of women then in science, and the attention one got because of being a woman was, it used to often get very oppressive, and there were very, very few people who treated me as a science student first and a woman or whatever after. Vijay Kapahi was one of them. I was very lucky because he was my supervisor. There was Ratnakar here in the library, and Srini, who were two others who were like that. And of course, Annamani was very much like that. So that was really, really refreshing. So it was really nice to have her around, and she had a very positive, shall we say, impact into my times those days. And I guess the second reason that qualifies me is that I'm very proud to have been part of the Astronomical Society of India group which instituted the Annamani Memorial Lecture Series. And this is the group for gender equity. And so the idea is that gender inequity is a social problem, and therefore we need inputs from the social sciences and history and philosophy and all humanities and all these other disciplines in order to be able to address the problem. And so the Annamani lecture series is about that. So I actually went back into my backup drives, and I did actually find my presentation from 2007. And this is the question I tried to ask at that time. Some of the things really made me laugh. I mean, certain things I framed, I think, correctly, as in I still agree that that's the way to frame them. And this is how I kind of put my vision, saying, I happen to be a woman, but I'm hoping that someday, at least in scientific settings, that fact would be only as important as, say, my taste in fiction or my competence in fishing. And then I put across these fantastic quotes which had really inspired me and many of us at the time. I think, is Rita still here? Yeah, okay. I won't read the quotes, but Ursula Le Guin is a big favorite of many of us, and The Left Hand of Darkness in particular frames the gender issue very, very strongly. I won't read out this quote. It can be found on the internet, but they're very, very powerful quotes. And I also set out the reasons why gender inequity in the sciences is different from, or why is it special compared to gender inequity everywhere else. And these were the three reasons I put forth, and I think these reasons apply globally, but here there is perhaps also the extra reason about the idea of merit and brilliance and genius and so on, which negatively impacts inequity on all dimensions, which I didn't have here at the time. And of course, I talked about rigorous enforcement of the gender equity cell activities. And then I had shown this poster. This was some conference. I thought it had been organized just before I gave my talk, but the dates don't quite match. But this was a conference in TIFR, International Cosmic Ray Conference, and just see how the members have been listed. So on the right, you have the you have the National Organizing Committee. And of course, there are no within bracket Ms. people there. But in the International Advisory, what's it called? Council, I think it's called. Committee. International Advisory Committee, there are within bracket Ms. People from China, Russia, and the US. And then within bracket Ms. people also in the organizing committee. And I remember writing to them about this and also copying some of these people. Only Virginia Trimble replied back. So I ranted about this in my talk in RRI. I don't think anyone thought it was very important. They thought I was ranting about something quite trivial. And this is what I said at the time, and I was really laughing about this because I completely disagree with this now. At that time, I said the primary deterrent is the socio-cultural factor, which absolves male members of the household from sharing responsibilities. So I think all of you know that Annamani was born over a century ago. Actually, she had her early life and education in Kerala. She did her college in Madras and then won a scholarship to do graduate studies because of her performance, and she came to the Raman Institute to do her graduate research. And you perhaps know that somebody called Kamla Bhagwat Shoni had a few years earlier paved the way for women to come into this institute, because otherwise it would have been impossible. When Kamla Bhagwat, who was a topper of Bombay University, applied for graduate study in the Indian Institute of Science, where Raman was the director, he refused her admission simply on the ground that she was a woman. And she then went on dharna, kind of, and then he relented, but with extremely humiliating conditions tied to her admission. She nevertheless came. She had a very good advisor and did very well after that, and then a PhD in Cambridge and so on. So anyway, she opened the door for women to come into graduate studies, and so by then, I guess Raman had shifted here, so there was Annamani, and there were a couple of others as well. There was Lalita Doraiswamy, later who became Lalita Chandrasekhar, and Sunanda Bai, and Annamani. So she went on to become a pioneering Indian physicist and meteorologist. She started her career right after independence and carried out path-breaking research. And it's important to remember that she was born at a time when the women's literacy level in the country was around about 1%. And she was only born about 60 years after Savitribai Phule and Fatima Sheikh opened the doors of education to people who were other than upper caste men in India. And many of you perhaps know the kind of circumstances under which they did it. They were both friends. Savitribai Phule and her spouse, Jyotiba Phule, who was also, they were both together very committed to education for all. They were thrown out of their house because of this, because they dared to open the doors of education to anybody other than upper caste people. And Fatima Sheikh gave them shelter in her home and also gave part of her house to start their first school. And then she got into it as well. And so Savitribai Phule and Fatima Sheikh went to Ahmednagar, trained together teachers training and then came back, and Fatima Sheikh also learned Marathi, and they both taught in the school, and it was said that they would walk to the school with an extra sari in their bags because they would get pelted and thrown cow dung at them and so on by the sort of upper caste interests who did not want education to be open to all. And roughly several decades after that is when Annamani was born. And so it was a very sort of a churning period. But of course, it was not one uniform thing across the country. The national movement had also taken off. She had a father who was, I guess they came from a Syrian Christian family, but he was a practicing agnostic. He always taught her, she said, to question everything, which was, I think, huge cultural capital for her. Education, because of the circumstances in Kerala, was free up to high school in that state. She grew up during the national struggle. She was heavily inspired by Gandhi and the Vaikom struggle against caste oppression. So Gandhi had visited at that time, and I think around then is when she really sort of became this Gandhian in every sense of the word sort of thing. Sarojini Naidu at that time became Congress president. That was very inspirational for a huge number of both men and women. And that kind of politicization does build, huge cultural capital. That stood her in good stead, I think. So she came into the Raman Institute as for her PhD, but she was completely deprived of intellectual discourse, because although Raman, with the experience of Kamala Shoni, did open the doors for women students, he believed in gender segregation, as a result of which the women students, so Sunanda Bai also entered the Raman Institute. I don't remember exactly when, but they were kind of contemporaries, Annamani and Sunanda Bai. And so they could not interact with the boys, with their fellow PhD students and so on. So this whole business about intellectual discourse and discussions and free-flowing chats and all that that we take for granted when we have been students was denied to both of them. And of course they had to face things like aspersions that only women who don't get married join Raman's lab. Sunanda Bai was actually officially married, but apparently her spouse lived elsewhere, and people thought she was not married or something. But whatever, I mean, either way, this should not have been something they faced. There would be disparaging, very carefully chosen nicknames for the women students. They did research which involved very long experiments, and so did the men, of course, but the men could take naps and things sort of anywhere, in the passage, in the lawns, or whatever, whereas the women felt constrained to not do that, so they would crawl under their tables and nap there in order to rest during these long experiments. She landed up publishing 5 single-author papers, but was denied a PhD. I'm sure all of you know that story. The pretext was that she didn't have a master's degree. So that is why I mean, it's sort of nice, I think, that the theses are held in the Raman's, in the library, in the Raman library. So they are just there, sort of nondescript. Both these people, Sunanda Bai and Annamani, did not get their PhD degrees, despite of having done PhD research. In fact, Sunanda Bai, sadly, just before she was to leave for Sweden for her postdoc, she took her own life, and it's not clear why, which had a very negative consequences. Sunanda Bai, I don't know. There was something. Yeah, I don't know. I think when she was going to go to Sweden, her aspiration still was that that would get sorted out and she would get the degree, but apparently it didn't. So, yeah. So anyway, like I said, Navani had a lot in her. She got a scholarship to go to England. It didn't seem very palatable at first because she was a very staunch nationalist, and how do I take a scholarship from a colonial power? But then somebody convinced her that this is actually national money. I mean, it is the colonial powers have made money off of us, and so it's fine to take that scholarship and go to England. So she did that. The scholarship was not for physics, but for meteorology, so she plunged into that. She did not get shackled by the institution of marriage. In fact, she seems to have had very, very negative views of the institution of marriage. Several of her somewhat, she had a really good sense of humor, so she has a lot of humorous comments to make about that. And then there was her very illustrious career in the meteorological department after she came back, which was right around the time we got our independence, and she did a lot of really outstanding work. India was one of the 5 countries to develop an indigenous ozone sonde. And so she was made a member of the International Ozone Commission. And she also played a key role in India's first rocket launch at the behest of Vikram Sarabhai. She built a meteorological observatory at Tumba. And of course, it was a very successful launch, and it was a landmark event in our science and technology history. And she retired from the department, and then she came to the Raman Institute again as a visiting person. That is when I knew her as a PhD student. So what about these obstacles that she faced? Where are we with those kinds of things today? The Astronomical Society of India, the Working Group for Gender Equity, did a survey a couple of years ago. And so this is where the fraction of women faculty in the elite institutions in astrophysics stand. So you can see, of course, RRI is there. It is definitely better than during Annamani's time or during even my time as a PhD student, but lots to walk ahead. And the survey also asked people about perceptions. So the respondents to the survey were 45% women, and the women more than the men dominated the under 50 cohort in the responses to the survey. And some of the so the survey results are still work in progress, and people like Harvinder Jassal and others are working on finalizing them. These are some select results that we published in a conference last year. So, for example, 22% of the women reported having faced sexual harassment. 38% women and 38% men reported knowing someone who faced sexual harassment. 83% of the women and 43% of the men perceived gender discrimination in academic institutions. Majority respondents reported absence of workplace childcare. Most felt that the gender gap was due to societal constraints on women, like what I thought in 2007. 91% of the women and 85% of the men felt that childcare facilities in the workplace would reduce the gender gap. 80% women and 70% men felt mentoring programs for young women would help reduce the gender gap. And most felt that open discussions on gender discrimination were needed. And it's kind of interesting here because you do have a very, very large fraction saying number 3, which is that they perceive gender discrimination in academic institutions. And despite that, they say that it is these societal constraints on women which are a result of the gender gap, which is kind of strange. And also that, mentoring would help reduce the gender gap. Yeah.
43% men who perceive gender discrimination of women, right? Against women.
Yes.
Just
because
to be clear.
yeah, sure. yes. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I can't remember the details of the question asked. I assume that is the case, but we should check that. Yeah, next time we administer the survey, we should.
I also wanted to. We've had in discussions with students. Like the ethics class last year, it wasn't the predominant idea, but some students did say, "Oh, but what about discrimination against guys?" Because we had the discussion about affirmative action.
Right.
Yeah,
No, we do. Sorry. No, I was saying we do need to clarify that very, very carefully. Yeah.
No, the last point, that open discussions. Actually, this is a very important point, because if you just look at the audience today, this is a Women's Day audience. Okay, there is a fair representation, but there could have been many more men over here.
And actually, in 2007, when I gave the talk, there were a lot more people
faculty,
in the audience.
Men faculty. I can
Yes.
see Pramod, and I think Shantan was also there. But other than that, it's a very glaring absence.
Yes.
And
that was a little different.
That.
Yeah, that was actually different in 2007. I remember that very well.
I'm going to interrupt you. So our male colleagues claim that they are watching the live streaming. So I don't know how true that is.
We're watching them watching us.
Yes. Yes, we should.
Right. So about the fact that the gender gap was due to societal constraints, I don't want to present a whole lot of data. There are data, but I just wanted to point this out, that if you look at PhDs in science who are employed in higher education in India, about 45% are women as of 2015. I need to ask Sachdeva how she got the more recent results, because I was not able to decipher the results from the recent survey. Yeah, I know Aisha, but the thing is I just couldn't get the data in a form that I needed. So I should talk to you as to how you got that.
One quick clarification. In the respondents, are they all from those institutions that you listed?
Mostly yes, because it's astrophysicists at the Astrophysics Conference, the annual Astronomical Society of India conference. So they administer the survey at the conference.
Okay. So it is not
although I think there is now, it's online, so it's possible that people could, but it would then go to astrophysicists or members of the society, as in, it would go to members of the society plus the others who are not members but who come for the conferences.
But it could include university as well? Because I'm curious
No,
about the 23%.
some of them are from universities. Now there are astrophysics departments in universities, right?
Okay.
So
it's not just the elite?
No, it's not just the elite, but it would be dominated by...
And the 23% sexual harassment is a very large figure. That's why I wanted to understand that.
Oh, right. Yeah, that would, if anything, be larger in the elite institution. I just wanted to point out that the gender gap in physics is 20% in this number of science PhDs employed in higher education in India. So there can't be such a difference between disciplines if it is societal expectations which are playing the major role. So that was one rebuttal of these perceptions in the survey. The other thing is about the mentoring. So the last but one point, that mentoring young women would help reduce the gender gap. This is another myth, according to me, because if you look at the data, the pie chart, the donut is the Inspire Fellows, and there are more young women than men winning those in sciences. The plot on the right is the Indian Academy Summer Fellowships, and it has a plot of both the applicant pool and the selected, and in both cases, one is tracking the other, which is good. But there are like 60% of the fellowships are won by girls or women. This is for undergrad, actually, so women. So I think the idea that young women or girls are not interested in science is a myth, at least in India. And this survey, which is published in Current Science a few years ago, of four high school students from 4 schools in Dehradun, they tested perceptions, and they asked, for example, they put the statement, fewer girls than boys are interested in higher studies in science and math, and many more boys than girls said yes. Here boys is red and girls is blue. Many more girls than boys said no, and many more boys than girls said don't know. And they did a couple of other perceptions also, like girls are not good at science and maths. Many more boys thought that to be the case. So mentoring of girls is not the need of the hour. What is the need of the hour is that all young minds must learn that people of all genders can competently do science. That is the need of the hour. So I think it is misguided to invest in these programs for young girls. I mean, it feels very warm and fuzzy. You know, somebody is having like a math school for young girls, and some physics something for young girls, and a star party for young girls. That is clearly not the need of the hour, and when it is not the need of the hour and you do it anyway, then it can cause harm because you're unnecessarily segregating by gender where that is not actually required, and it is also not a nice thing to do. Gender, as far as the gender gap within the profession, I don't want to again present a whole lot of details because I need to finish quickly. But I did want to come back to Annamani and Vigyan Prasar, which is the DST-funded science communication institution, made a documentary film on Annamani. And I was quite taken aback at some of the statements they made in it. For example, Professor Raman offered her the opportunity to join him in continuing research on fluorescence, an unthinkable privilege for a woman at that time. Now, why would this be an unthinkable privilege? I mean, she was as qualified, or even she was obviously very, very well qualified because she won a scholarship to do her research. It was Raman's privilege that she came to him saying, I want to work in your lab, right? And then there is this thing that this is when she went into the department, the meteorological department, on a war footing, and trained a core group of experts, etc., etc. And it ends by saying the department was a hive that hummed with activity around Anna, the queen bee. Okay. And then in 1953, she was promoted to head the instrumentation division of IMND of 121 men. An unusual achievement for a woman at the time. I mean, it's like, you know, her achievement is to be the boss of 120 men. I mean, like, what's going on here, you know? Her achievement was that she built instrumentation to do real science, right? That was her achievement. But they still want to cast it in this, that she was a woman and all her staff were men, which incidentally is not a very complimentary thing for the department, that they were all 121 were all men. But, you know, it is just framed in such an odd and crazy way. And this, I think, was the last of them. Miss Annamani can well be described as the mother of India's weather instruments. So we are still in that patriarchal mindset. I mean, even Vigyan Prasar, which has an extra responsibility because they're doing science communication and projecting science and how science is done and who done science, they have an extra responsibility to project it as something that everybody does. And this film was made in 2016, so not that long ago. So I wanted to end just to reiterate about the Annamani lectures. They happen quite regularly, so do look out for them, and the older ones are on YouTube. Do take a look at them. Some of them are really good. And I just wanted to show this. This is a cartoon that appeared in Resonance in 2017 when I guest edited an issue with an all-women authorship. And I'm really proud of this cartoon because I use social media to find this woman cartoonist to do a cartoon for the magazine. And I contacted her through social media and got her to do this cartoon. So I really want to show you that. And of course, I think all of you know about this comic book on Annamani that was written by Nandita Jayaraj. And it is available in print, is also freely downloadable. And it's a very cute cartoon, so I'll stop there.
In IIA, there are many women faculty members. Do you heard about harassment in workplace often?
Gosh, don't get me started, please.
It's sure that the number is much higher.
No, so first of all, IIA had more women than any other institute. It still doesn't have a lot of women. There were about 10, that kind of thing among 50. So that's not a whole lot of women. It just happens to, the other places are so dismal that IIA looked good. There is some history to it, I have to admit. I concluded after my stint in IIA that the fact that I had at least that many women was because of a culture that was set by the founder, which was a very different culture from other places. I think Venu Bapu was far more gender neutral. I think he held women to the same academic standards as he did the men. And he set a culture, very, very strong culture, because I felt it very strongly when I went to the observatory. And so comparing my experience at the IIA observatory compared to the TFR observatory in Ooty, in the TFR observatory at Ooty, it was a terrible experience. We were always thought of as people who came there for time pass, and we were never taken seriously. Whereas at the IIA observatories, we were always, at least I felt that way, that I was always given the same respect that any other scientist was given, right to the very lowest level of staff, to the highest level of staff, engineers, everybody. That was my experience. So there could be something there. Some sociologist, historian has to do a proper study. But it's still not a high number. It's certainly not a case of complete absence of sexual harassment. No, not at all.
When you talked about the school kids and the opinion of the boys was the girls are not good in STEM subjects. But what is interesting is that in those schools, in whatever schools I know, majority of teachers are actually women. Even physics, my daughter's school physicist, all physics was taught by women. Then how it comes? From where it comes from?
Yeah, so I think there has been a regression. So for example, when I was in school, I went to a girls' school, but the only men teachers I had were for music, dance, and Kannada. All other teachers, including NCC and games, and of course science and history and English and everything, were women. And I don't ever remember women telling any of us that this was not for us and that was not for us and something else was better for us. I don't ever remember that. When I went to college, I also went to a girls' college. There the people were mixed, the faculty was mixed, but again, equal representation. 2 heads of departments were women. The only PhD in my college among the faculty was a physics PhD, and she was a woman. There were 2 single women. There were 2 Roman Catholic nuns who were my science professors, and so on. So I thought of science as different, exactly like Annamani did also. Annamani also would say things like, what is this big hoopla about women in science and all that? Because, there is that ambience of, there was a national struggle thing. I was born after that, but there was still that ambience of, egalitarianism as the ideal and all of those things. So we imbibed all those things, and so did the teachers and all that. But I think there has been a regression because science is taught in a very apolitical way. You're supposed to only do your studies. You're not supposed to look outside of it. And also the TV media and all that is very heavily sexualized and genderized. So I think people imbibe these things. So even women teachers, it doesn't matter whether the teacher is a woman or a man. What matters is, do they have a good relationship with their students, and do they tell different things to different groups of students? So even women teachers are known to tell girl students, why are you studying physics? You're going to get married anyway, and that sort of thing. So there has been a regression, I feel.
Okay, any other questions?
Just as you mentioned Annamani, I also remember my mother also remarking that she, if you asked her if she faced gender discrimination, she would say, no, I don't remember
Exactly,
anything
yeah.
like that.
Right. So even for me, it was when I went to IIT that it first hit me. Until then, I always thought of science as a cocoon, where the societal discrimination doesn't exist. I thought of education as a sort of, progressive, modern thing. Yeah.
One of the possibilities is also what I think one has discussed is this thing that in physics, there is a sort of genius syndrome that we have.
Yeah.
Which is highlighted. I mean, I have nothing against Feynman. I think he was brilliant in all of this. But the stories and the idea that there are just a few geniuses and all of them are men. Marie Curie is never. She was just this hardworking scientist who worked and slogged, and they sort of gave her the Nobel Prize. That was sort of and this idea of genius, of inbuilt, somehow is much more insidious in physics than I think it is in any other science.
Yes.
And somehow, because it's a mixture of mathematics as well as, physical intuition, which somehow only men have privilege to. There's a culture here which I think is also very detrimental to physics itself as a science. And if one sees this genderization of it as something that's actually impacting science and the practice of science, I think that is an into, potentially...
Yeah. But also it has impacted those who have kind of, despite all this, tunneled through. Like, like if you look at the Nobel Prizes, for instance, Marie Curie, even she, it was only because Pierre fought for it that she got it. And then there was Maria Gopatmaya after 60 years, and then there was Donna Strickland after another whatever years. But in between, there's Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin, for example. I mean, hers was a transformational discovery where she showed that, the sun is not made up of like what rocks and stones are made up of. And that really changed our whole concept. But she didn't get the prize. And so there were so many others. There was Vera Rubin, there was Jocelyn Bell, and these are only the physics people that I know of. I mean, I'm sure there'll be so many others, right? So they were denied the prize only because they were women, for no other reason, right? So... Right. Yeah, but I mean, even that second one, it was so bad, bro. She got it, but then she was told not to come to the ceremony because it was said that she is having this affair with Langevin and all that. Yeah.
I also wanted to, point something out. So, the stereotyping starts with very small children. Because I used to be part of this organization called the Global Young Academy, and they had asked little children, to draw pictures of scientists.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody drew an old man with, crazy hair working on a bomb. So, that's what books say. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, that's the stereotype. There's no running away from that.
Right. So HPCSE has done quite a bit of work on combing the NCERT textbooks and recommending things. I don't know what's going to happen now. And that's why one needs comics like that for young children. Which showcase Annamani and the story of the diamonds and all that. It's very nice.
I have two comments. One is that when we are trying to make space for women, and if we are not overhauling the system, if we are not changing the system as a whole, sometimes what we do is that we give it even undue importance, and we just try to assert ourselves in it. Means like you need that Nobel Prize, but so you would not disregard the patriarchal whole setup. You would just try to find your place in it, so that way you also give it that kind of importance. So yes, but changing the whole thing, bringing a huge change is difficult. But sometimes it feels like we are just catering to patriarchy. Like, what is our main focus audience? Our main focus audience is RRI male. They should, see it. They should attend it. They should. So you want appreciation, or you want those issues to be discussed. Yeah. They have to be involved. Yes.
Sorry,
Yes.
did you said RRI main? I didn't get that.
So I'm saying that suppose you are organizing something.
Oh,
on-
males.
Male,
Okay.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Then I have suggested this to her, that yes, we should all sit and discuss these things, but we can also have a day where we call women from various schools or colleges, and they can actually see the issues have to be discussed with everyone. That can also be done separately. And also, if we could have a wider audience and we could just show what kind of activities that women scientists do at RRI.
Yeah, so I agree with you that we try to do band-aids. I think don't quite agree that by trying to do band-aids we are making a big thing of it. Is that what you were saying? I'm not sure. I mean, I agree that Nobel Prizes are just a symptom. So we need to fix the system so that Nobel Prizes get fixed, so that young mentoring gets fixed, so that faculty ratios get fixed, and Bhatnagar Awards get fixed, and Governing Council gets fixed, and everything gets fixed. We need to fix the system. And these are all just symptoms. That part I agree.
I'll give you a personal example to explain what I'm saying. So my bhabi, my brother's wife, they are 3 sisters. So she wanted that when my niece was born, she said that her surname should also be there. So she said that it should not just be Sara Sachdeva, it should be Sara Rathi Sachdeva or something like that. So I was saying that then why are you bringing your father's surname? Why don't you bring your mother's surname? So yes, you want to go against patriarchy, but in that process you are actually being a proponent of it.
Yeah, but in that particular name thing, I would say I would favor choice. It should be it should be their choice, and maybe your comment will make her give it mother's name. Who knows? I mean, my son once turned around and said, "I want your mother's maiden name." I mean, no, he wanted my mother's. Or my grandmother made it, something like that. So it just felt very complicated and he didn't actually do it. But, so the point is they should have the autonomy to decide whichever they want in that particular case.
See, one thing I felt that in these institutions and harassment processes, the people who harass, most of the cases men, they don't realize they are harassing. They think they are doing the right thing. So this sense of right and wrong, it is to be established at the beginning, because they are very academically qualified, but the sense of what I say morality is not there.
Yeah.
So the problem is there. They think we are right.
Yes. Yes, that is true.
It is not simply a moral issue that whether they are right or wrong. I think it is also that they have authority to judge any woman, any of their peers, which even if they are not qualified to judge, they will judge. And that, I think, is beyond morality. That is sort of a claim, a patriarchal claim.
But it's the way to redress that is to make our governance more transparent and accountable. This is a fairly well-established dictum that institutions have to make their processes transparent and accountable, that is good for everybody. It's not just good for women or men or, it's good for everybody to do that. And in Indian institutions, it's a particular, elite institutions, it's a particular problem. There's a particular lack of transparency and accountability. So that is where, needs to address. For example, yeah, but I can tell you, all of us are brought up to accept sexist thought and sexist action. So regardless of our gender, we are gender biased, all of us. So just having women in a governing council or something, it's a good thing to do because it's the right thing to do. All governing councils should have proper representation. But to expect that that will solve the problem is, I feel, not a good expectation.
So we will have a woman on our governing council. Annapurni Subramaniam is, I think she's taking over from, she's going to be there from May.
Quite apart from governing council, if you just look at RRI itself, over the past few decades, there have been several positive changes for the better. There are committees where there are many more women representations, and certainly that makes a positive difference. I don't think it's a step in the wrong direction, it's a step in the right direction.
No, I'm saying that there should be representation because it's the right thing to do, not because it's a step to solving the problems that we are talking about in governance, in gender harassment and all that. They won't necessarily solve that problem.
But it does matter, because in such situations, we do know, for example, in interview committees and other places, that these things and remarks about women come up. So when you have another woman, it really does act as a check, as a fairly decent check and balance. And not in every case, but statistically, it makes a difference.
Yeah, but it depends,
You don't accept the same comment. I'm saying that when you're on a committee, and for a lot of women, we don't accept the same comment from our male colleagues.
You may not, Sumati.
Many women will not.
No, but many women do also.
No, then you say, okay.
So I'm saying all of us need gender equity education. Everybody needs it. Because you cannot assume that just because a person is a woman, she will be gender unbiased. And therefore, I'm saying committee memberships should be there, should be diverse, because it's the right thing to do. If they are not there, then it's just wrong, that's all. But will that solve the other problems? That is not necessarily true. Because why I'm saying this is that people are now touting this, all our committees, now there's a government rule that all committees should have women. But what Sonali was saying, that the systemic problem, that won't necessarily get addressed by that.
That's a good one. She said that's because there are no women.
No, yeah. I've been on committees, even on committees where there have been men and the women who were scientists, engineers, they have asked candidates, when are you married, how many children do you have? And then after the committee meeting is over, I tell them, look, this is not appropriate because whatever, you should only give the job description to all candidates and say, is this okay with you? If the candidate is a shortlisted candidate and all that. And they said, no, we are just asking out of concern. It's perfectly fine. So then I had to, on some occasions, I was chair. So I had to step in and say, no, I'm chair and I'm stopping this. That's all. So like being very heavy-handed. But so there's no guarantee either way. I think gender equity training at all levels is absolutely necessary.